What if everything you've been taught about masculinity is a lie? What if the honor, sacrifice, and duty drilled into men from birth are nothing more than a systemic trap, a divine wind blowing them toward their own destruction? From the battlefields of history to the silent wars of modern relationships, men are conditioned to believe their highest purpose is to serve, suffer, and even die for others, especially women. But who benefits from this script, and why is it so hard for men to question it? Imagine a world where boys are raised to believe their lives have inherent value, not as shields, providers, or disposable heroes, but as human beings entitled to their own dreams, safety, and happiness. The truth is unsettling. Men are groomed for sacrifice in ways so normalized that to resist feels like betrayal. Suicide rates, emotional repression, and the relentless pressure to man up reveal the cost of this indoctrination. Meanwhile, women are taught their worth is unconditional. Why the double standard? This isn't about blaming women. It's about exposing the invisible machinery that turns men into willing casualties. Whether through war, financial servitude, or emotional labor, the expectation remains men must give, women must receive. But what happens when men stop accepting this deal? The answer could unravel centuries of conditioning and ignite the most radical revolution in human history. For centuries, masculinity has been synonymous with sacrifice. Men are raised to believe that their worth is measured by what they can endure, provide, or surrender, often for the benefit of others. This unspoken contract is so deeply embedded in culture that questioning it feels unnatural, even taboo. But beneath the rhetoric of honor and duty lies a disturbing truth. Men are systematically conditioned to see themselves as expendable. From the kamikaze pilots of World War II to the modern man drowning in silent despair, the script remains unchanged. Men die in wars they didn't start, toil in jobs they hate, and suppress their needs to appease partners, all while being told this is nobility. But what if this nobility is just exploitation in disguise? What if the pressure to sacrifice isn't a biological imperative, but a cultural one, designed to keep men compliant? This conversation isn't about resentment, it's about awakening. If men are ever to claim true equality, they must first recognize the water they've been swimming in, and dare to imagine a life beyond it. From the moment a boy takes his first breath, society begins shaping him into a vessel of service. He is taught that his value lies not in who he is, but in what he can provide, endure, or sacrifice for others. This conditioning starts early and is reinforced at every stage of his development. Little boys are told to be tough when they cry, to suck it up when they're hurt, and to protect the girls, as if their own safety is secondary. These lessons are framed as virtues, strength, honor, duty. But beneath the noble language is a far darker message: your pain matters less, your life is expendable, and your worth is conditional. By contrast, girls are raised with an implicit understanding that they are valuable simply for existing. They are comforted when they cry, shielded from unnecessary harm, and assured that their feelings matter. While women certainly face their own societal pressures, the foundational message they receive is one of inherent worth. No one questions whether a woman deserves love, safety, or care. It is assumed. But for men, these things must be earned through sacrifice. A man who refuses to risk himself for others is labeled selfish, weak, or cowardly, while a woman who prioritizes her well-being is often praised for having healthy boundaries. This double standard is so deeply ingrained that it is often mistaken for biology. We are told that men are naturally more disposable, that their aggression and stoicism are evolutionary traits rather than cultural impositions. But history reveals the truth: this is not nature, but nurture. In times of war, men are drafted while women are protected. In times of crisis, men are expected to step forward while women are ushered to safety. Even in everyday life, men are pushed into high-risk, high-stress jobs, construction, mining, firefighting, while women are gently steered toward safer, more nurturing roles. The disparity is glaring, yet it is rarely questioned, because it has been normalized as the natural order. Romantic relationships amplify this dynamic. A man is expected to be the provider, the protector, the emotional rock, always giving, always strong. always putting his partner's needs before his own. If he falters, he is met with disappointment or even contempt. Meanwhile, a woman's contributions, emotional labor, domestic work, or even financial support are framed as gifts, not obligations. The unspoken contract is clear: his labor is owed, hers is voluntary. This imbalance is so pervasive that men who demand reciprocity are often shamed as entitled, while women who expect male sacrifice are seen as simply upholding tradition. The consequences of this conditioning are devastating. Men suffer in silence, their mental health deteriorating under the weight of unrelenting expectations. They die by suicide at rates far higher than women, not because they are inherently more fragile, but because they have been taught that their suffering is irrelevant. Unless it serves someone else, they are praised for enduring pain but punished for expressing it. A woman in distress is met with empathy. A man in distress is met with impatience or ridicule. The message is clear: your pain is only valid if it benefits others. Even the concept of male heroism is tied to sacrifice. We celebrate men who die saving others, who work themselves to exhaustion, who endure unimaginable hardship without complaint. But we rarely celebrate men who live, who prioritize their own happiness, who refuse to destroy themselves for someone else's benefit. A man who chooses survival over martyrdom is seen as less noble, less worthy of admiration. This is not biology, it is indoctrination. The most insidious part of this conditioning is that men themselves often uphold it. Many take pride in their suffering, believing that the more they sacrifice, the more valuable they become. They internalize the idea that love must be earned through service, that respect is contingent on self-denial. A man without a cause, without someone to die for, feels worthless, as if his existence has no meaning unless it is spent in servitude. This is not natural male instinct. It is the result of a lifetime of programming. Breaking this cycle requires recognizing it for what it is: a systemic distortion of male humanity. Men are not born believing they must suffer to matter. They are taught it, and just as women have fought to redefine their roles beyond servitude and submission, men must now confront the lies they've been fed about their own worth. The first step is simple, yet radical: to believe that a man's life has value beyond what he can sacrifice. The expectation that men must be providers is so deeply embedded in romantic relationships that it often goes unquestioned. From courtship to marriage, men are conditioned to believe that their financial and material contributions are not just appreciated, but obligatory. This dynamic begins early, with traditions like men paying for dates, buying gifts, and demonstrating their ability to provide as a way to prove their worth as partners. These customs are framed as romantic gestures, but beneath the surface, they reinforce a transactional expectation. A man's love is measured by his willingness to transfer resources to a woman. This imbalance persists and often intensifies in long-term relationships. Marriage, in particular, has historically functioned as an economic arrangement where a man's labor and assets are pooled for the benefit of the household, but with disproportionate risks for him. In many cases, men assume the role of primary breadwinner, working longer hours in higher, stress jobs to maintain financial stability. Even in dual-income households, studies show that men still contribute a larger share of their earnings to shared expenses, while women retain more discretionary income for personal use. The cultural narrative justifies this by portraying male provision as natural or chivalrous. But in practice, it operates as a silent redistribution system where men's resources flow toward women with little reciprocity. The legal system further entrenches this dynamic. In the event of divorce, men are far more likely to suffer financial devastation, losing assets, paying alimony, or being burdened with child support payments that often exceed actual childcare costs. Courts overwhelmingly favor women in these settlements, operating on the assumption that men's primary role is to fund their ex-partner's lifestyle rather than maintain their own financial autonomy. Even when men earn less than their spouses, they are rarely awarded the same financial protections women receive. The message is clear: a man's money is never fully his. It is merely held in trust until a woman claims it. This expectation extends beyond formal relationships. Single men face what is often called the bachelor tax, higher living costs due to the lack of shared expenses, fewer social safety nets, and even workplace discrimination in benefits allocation. Meanwhile, single women benefit from societal sympathy, subsidized services, and cultural narratives that frame their financial struggles as systemic injustices rather than personal responsibilities. The same society that praises women for financial independence often shames men who resist the provider role, labeling them cheap, selfish, or unfit for partnership. Dating apps and modern romance have only amplified these disparities. Research shows that women overwhelmingly prefer men who earn significantly more than they do, while men place far less emphasis on a partner's income. This creates a market where men must compete financially to attract partners, driving them into higher stress careers and unsustainable spending habits just to remain desirable. The rise of luxury dating trends, where men are expected to fund lavish experiences to impress women, further entrenches the idea that male worth is tied to purchasing power. Even progressive relationships that reject traditional gender roles often fall into the same traps. Men who attempt to push back against financial expectations are frequently met with accusations of stinginess or lack of commitment. Meanwhile, women who demand equality in emotional labor or household chores rarely face the same scrutiny when it comes to financial contributions. The result is a lopsided dynamic where men are still expected to subsidize women's lives, even in supposedly egalitarian partnerships. The psychological toll of this arrangement is rarely acknowledged. Men who struggle financially often experience intense shame, as their inability to provide is seen as a failure of masculinity. Conversely, men who do provide may grow resentful, realizing too late that their generosity is taken for granted rather than reciprocated. Yet discussing these frustrations is taboo. Men who voice dissatisfaction are dismissed as bitter or entitled, while women's financial grievances are treated as valid critiques of systemic inequality. What makes this system particularly insidious is its invisibility. Unlike formal taxation or welfare programs, romantic wealth redistribution operates through social pressure, emotional manipulation, and unspoken expectations. There are no laws mandating that men pay for dates or subsidize their partners' lifestyles. Yet the cultural enforcement is so strong that refusal carries steep social consequences. Men who opt out of this system face loneliness and exclusion, while women who opt out are celebrated as independent. The economic implications are staggering. Over a lifetime, the average man will transfer hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, to romantic partners through direct spending, shared living costs, and post-breakup settlements. This loss of capital limits men's ability to invest in themselves, retire early, or build generational wealth. Meanwhile, women benefit from compounded financial security, whether through direct support during relationships or post-separation payouts. The cumulative effect is a vast, unacknowledged transfer of wealth from men to women, all under the guise of love and tradition. This system persists because it is rarely framed in economic terms. People speak of romance as a matter of the heart, not the wallet, ignoring how financial expectations shape every stage of relationships. But love does not erase the material reality men are expected to pay, provide, and sacrifice, not as a choice, but as an obligation. Until this dynamic is openly challenged, romantic relationships will continue to function as one of the most effective wealth redistribution mechanisms in history, one that systematically advantages women at the expense of men. The staggering rates of male suicide reveal a devastating truth about how society conditions men to derive meaning from their existence. Across nearly every culture and demographic, men take their own lives at rates 3 to 4 times higher than women. While multiple factors contribute to this crisis, one of the most overlooked is the psychological impact of grooming men to believe their value comes exclusively from what they can provide or sacrifice for others. From childhood, boys are taught that their worth is transactional, that they must earn love, respect, and even the right to occupy space in the world through service and suffering. When a man fails to meet these expectations, or worse, finds himself without anyone to sacrifice for, he is left staring into an existential void where his life appears to have no inherent meaning. This conditioning begins early, as boys are discouraged from expressing vulnerability while simultaneously being told their primary role is to protect and serve. They learn that emotional needs are feminine and therefore shameful, while self-sacrifice is masculine and honorable. A boy who cries is mocked, but a boy who endures pain silently is praised. This creates a dangerous association between suffering and virtue, teaching men that their pain only matters when it serves someone else's needs. As these boys grow into men, they internalize the belief that their feelings are irrelevant unless they can be weaponized into productivity or protection for others. The result is a population of men who have never learned how to value themselves for who they are, only for what they can do. And when they can no longer do, they see no reason to be. The link between male suicide and the loss of a sacrificial role becomes especially clear when examining life transitions that strip men of their perceived purpose. Divorced men, for instance, kill themselves at rates nearly 9 times higher than divorced women. While financial strain plays a role, the psychological devastation runs deeper. Many of these men structured their entire identity around being providers and protectors for their families. When that role disappears, they are left without a sense of self, drowning in the quiet horror of realizing they never learned how to exist as anything other than a function. Similarly, unemployed men face suicide rates significantly higher than employed men, not just because of economic stress, but because work provides one of the few socially acceptable outlets for male sacrifice. Without a job, many men feel they have nothing left to offer the world, and thus no reason to remain in it. Even more disturbing is the phenomenon of men who despair not because they've lost their sacrificial role, but because they never found one to begin with. Young men who struggle romantically often describe feeling unnecessary in a world where women increasingly achieve financial and social independence. While this independence is positive, the cultural narrative hasn't updated to tell men what value they hold beyond being providers. The traditional script said a man's purpose was found in protecting and providing for a woman and family. But as that script becomes obsolete, nothing has replaced it. These men aren't mourning lost privileges. They're confronting the terrifying question of why they should exist at all in a society that never taught them their lives had intrinsic worth. The military provides perhaps the clearest example of how sacrificial conditioning operates and its psychological costs. Soldiers are explicitly trained to value the mission above their own lives, to find honor in the possibility of dying for their country. This mentality helps create effective warriors, but it devastates veterans who return to civilian life and struggle to find meaning without a cause to die for. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs estimates that roughly 17 veterans die by suicide every day, a rate 1.5 times higher than non-veterans. These numbers reveal the dark side of heroic narratives, when men are taught that their greatest possible act is self-annihilation for a higher purpose. Survival itself can feel like failure. Religious and cultural narratives compound this problem by glorifying male sacrifice as the pinnacle of virtue. From religious martyrs to action movie heroes, boys grow up surrounded by stories where a man's ultimate worth is proven through his destruction. These narratives rarely show the alternative: men who live long, happy lives while prioritizing their own well-being, because living for oneself isn't considered an admirable male story. The message sinks in early and deep. A man who isn't sacrificing is a man who isn't valuable. When real life fails to provide opportunities for such dramatic validation, many men languish in quiet desperation, unsure how to matter in a world that only taught them how to die meaningfully, not how to live meaningfully. Modern discussions about male suicide often focus on surface-level solutions, encouraging men to talk more or seek help, while ignoring the foundational issue. We've given men a script for their lives where the climax is their own erasure. Until we stop teaching boys that their worth is measured in blood, sweat, and sacrifice, and start teaching them that they are valuable simply because they exist, the tide of male despair will continue to rise. The tragedy isn't just that so many men die by suicide, but that so many reach that point genuinely believing the world wouldn't miss them. because we've spent their entire lives telling them they only matter when they're giving themselves away. The modern discourse around gender equality has focused overwhelmingly on empowering women to break free from traditional constraints, while largely ignoring the equally important need for men to liberate themselves from their own gendered expectations. For centuries, society has conditioned women to prioritize caregiving and self-sacrifice, while men have been equally conditioned to view themselves as disposable instruments of labor and protection. The feminist movement made tremendous progress in freeing women from their sacrificial roles, but a corresponding movement for male self-actualization has failed to materialize. True equality cannot exist until men feel as entitled as women do to pursue their own happiness, nurture their emotional lives, and define success on their own terms rather than through endless service to others. The cultural programming runs deep. From childhood, boys absorb the message that their worth is measured by what they can provide or endure, rather than who they are as individuals, while girls are increasingly told they can be anything. Astronauts, CEOs, presidents, boys continue to hear that they must be something useful: protectors, providers, human shields. This fundamental difference in messaging creates a psychological divide that persists into adulthood. Women learn to expect personal fulfillment as their birthright, while men learn to view fulfillment as something they might earn through sufficient sacrifice. The result is a dangerous imbalance where women feel increasingly empowered to demand equality in opportunities, while men remain trapped in expectations of inequality and obligations. This disparity becomes particularly evident in discussions about work-life balance. While it's now socially acceptable, even encouraged, for women to prioritize family over career or personal growth over professional achievement, men who make similar choices often face ridicule or suspicion. A woman who leaves the workforce to raise children is making a noble choice. A man who does the same is frequently viewed as lazy or emasculated. A woman who negotiates for higher pay is assertive. A man who refuses overtime to preserve family time is lacking ambition. These double standards reveal how thoroughly society still expects men to define themselves through sacrifice and endurance rather than self-determination. The realm of personal relationships showcases perhaps the starkest contradictions. Modern women rightly reject the idea that their value lies in serving men. Yet many still expect, often unconsciously, that men should derive meaning from serving them. The archetype of the self-sacrificing husband who works himself to exhaustion to provide a luxurious lifestyle for his family remains culturally celebrated, while the man who insists on equal emotional labor, equal financial contribution, and equal rights to personal time is frequently framed as selfish or inadequate. This creates a bizarre paradox where women demand equality in benefits but not in burdens, in privileges but not in responsibilities. Mental health statistics reveal the devastating consequences of this imbalance. Men account for nearly 80% of suicides in most Western nations, a horrifying disparity that directly correlates with the pressure to suppress emotions and measure self-worth through external achievement. While society has made great strides in creating space for women to discuss their mental health struggles openly, men remain trapped in silence, conditioned to believe that vulnerability equals weakness and that asking for help constitutes failure. The same culture that encourages women to practice self-care often shames men for doing the same, creating a world where women are nurtured while men are expected to nurture others at their own expense. Economic realities further entrench this divide. Men still dominate the most dangerous professions: logging, fishing, roofing, and mining, where life expectancy is often dramatically shortened by workplace hazards. While workplace safety has improved for white-collar jobs predominantly held by women, the blue-collar sectors dominated by men continue to see staggering injury and fatality rates. This occupational segregation persists because society still views male bodies as more expendable than female ones, a bias so deeply ingrained that most people never think to question it. True equality would require equal outrage over workplace deaths regardless of gender, but the current reality shows we still value male lives differently. The path forward requires nothing less than a fundamental reimagining of masculinity itself. Just as feminism encouraged women to reject limiting stereotypes and embrace their full humanity, men need permission to do the same, to value self-care as much as self-sacrifice, to view emotional expression as strength rather than weakness, to pursue dreams that don't involve martyrdom or provision. This doesn't mean abandoning positive masculine traits like resilience or responsibility, but rather expanding the definition of masculinity to include self-worth, self-compassion, and self-actualization. Practical changes must occur at every level of society. Educational systems need to teach boys that their feelings matter as much as their achievements. Workplace policies should stop privileging female work-life balance while expecting male employees to be perpetually available. Legal systems must recognize that men have equal rights to parental custody, domestic safety, and protection from abuse. Cultural narratives should celebrate male vulnerability and self-care as much as they celebrate female empowerment. Only when men feel as entitled as women do to prioritize their own well-being can we claim to have achieved genuine equality. The resistance to this vision will be fierce, coming not just from traditionalists invested in maintaining gender roles, but also from many women who have grown accustomed to gendered privileges they don't recognize as such. Just as some men resisted feminism because it threatened their unearned advantages, some women will resist male liberation because it threatens their expectations of male sacrifice. Overcoming this resistance requires the courage to name these double standards clearly and insist that equality must work in both directions, that just as women deserve freedom from restrictive femininity, men deserve freedom from restrictive masculinity. Anything less is not equality, but merely a shifting of oppression.